No? Yes. We're on now. Okay. If Mike was here, that would have worked the first time. Just kidding, John. Just kidding. I'd like to open up with a word of prayer and then a brief story, and then I'm going to turn it over to John. Heavenly Father, God, I just thank you so much for this day. God, I thank you for the sunshine and the beautiful landscape that you have painted with the changing of the seasons. God, I thank you for safe travels. I know there's people in this room that traveled a lot of miles to be here today, and so I just thank you that it was important for them to come, but that you kept them safe in their travels, and ask for the same as they return home. God, as we remember Mike today, God, I pray that you would put those memories and those stories on our hearts that just make us smile, because we all have beautiful memories of people that we love, and I know Mike is one of those people. So I thank you so much for that. I pray that you'd fill this place, Lord, and that you would give a peace and a comfort that can only come from you, a peace and a comfort that we couldn't understand or explain, but just knowing that it comes from you and from the peace of the Holy Spirit. Father, we thank you for that. We thank you for the gift of your Son. We pray in his holy name. Amen. My name's Eric. I'm the youth pastor here at Delta Christian Church, for you out-of-towners that don't know me. And when Mike first started coming, I think it might have been his second week, and it was before church service started on Sunday morning. He was here for at least one service. It might have been two, but I think it was one. Anyways, he was talking about how to get involved. He's like, what can I do? How can I get plugged in? And most people that come to visit, they want to kind of test the waters for a couple of months and make sure it's the right thing, and then maybe they'll get involved. And so I kind of proposed that to Mike, not necessarily to wait that long, but it's like, well, do you want to make sure that this is the place for you, and that you're being fed, you enjoy it here? And he's like, nope, I like it, and if I don't jump right in with both feet, I won't stick. Okay, let's see what we can do. So it was just kind of a funny thing that most people aren't that way. And for Mike to just say, I want to jump in right now, I just got to do it. It was a pretty cool thing, just to see his heart and to want to serve and just to be a part of this church family. It was great. So, John?
My name is John Alsdorf. I am the senior pastor here. I'm the new guy at Delta Christian, and actually newer than Mike. When I met Mike, I just assumed that Mike had been around a while, and he informed me that he was the new guy, and I said, I'm sorry, that title goes to somebody else now, because I was newer than Mike, So I began, I started here in February of this year, and so I came here several months after Mike began attending. I wasn't at the beginning of all of those, of that process, but so I had made a lot of assumptions. When you're the new guy, you kind of, it's hard to know who's been here how long. There were some people I knew had been here for a long time, but just made an assumption that Mike had been here for a while. And in my conversation with Mike, it became he made it abundantly clear right away that he was new to Delta Christian, and that was really exciting. Mike and I connected very easily and very quickly. When I came, I would say that Mike was like my first new friend in Delta, and I think a lot of people have come to think of Mike that way. This morning, I wanted to share just some of my impressions, I guess, as a pastor and a friend, about the Mike I knew, and it wasn't until very recently that I came to the understanding that the Mike I knew might not be the Mike you knew if you knew Mike for a long, long time. And so here's what I know about Mike. That Mike is, first of all, a very friendly and caring person. despite the fact that Mike was a formidable man with a towering stature. Instantly looked up to Mike. It was apparent that he was also a very kind and caring person. When I first met Mike, it was about 9 months ago. He had come to the office during the week just to say hi, and I came out of my office, and he greeted me with a smile and a handshake, and we had this is where the whole exchange about who's new came about, and Mike had been attending the church since the previous fall, and had just expressed that he had just found great encouragement and connection and friendship here at Delta Christian. He told me that he had some questions that day about faith and wanted to talk, and so we made plans to meet together, and he suggested the Doghouse Espresso here in town, and so we met there later that week, and as we sat in the coffee shop and talked, remember, both of us were new here. People continued to come up to us and interrupt our conversation because they knew Mike and just wanted to say hi. Person after person after person. I think my sister even did that day. and just kept saying hi, and I'm thinking, this does not feel like a new guy. This feels like, like, how do you know all these people? And I remember thinking, you have to be around for a while for this to happen. And Mike would say hi to this person and have this conversation briefly with them, and then he would turn to me and explain who the person was and give me a real, rough outline of why this person had come to talk to Mike. And it was usually something a need that he discovered in their life, or that he was able to encourage or help or do something in their life, and they were expressing gratitude and friendship with Mike. In that moment, I remember thinking in my plan, because Mike had told me he kind of conveyed to me that he was a brand new believer, and he was kind of starting from the beginning, and he just wanted me to explain it to him like that. So I was there to explain what following Jesus looks like. And after a few minutes of this, I kind of felt silly. I explained to Mike what Jesus looked like, because it seemed to me that Mike had it down pretty well already. He was kind and caring toward people. And I think that is one of the most important parts of following Jesus, just being kind and caring toward people and showing them that love. And so I was quickly able to explain that to him, and I shared with him some of the ins and outs of baptism, and it was the following Sunday on, I believe it was March 5th of this year, that I had the privilege of baptizing Mike into Jesus. Mike was generous. Mike was a very generous person. Sometimes he would come up to me and tell me that he kind of got carried away sometimes with his generosity. But the fact was that Mike found great pleasure in expressing the generosity, I think, that God placed in his heart. This past spring, our church held a Compassion Sunday event in which we encourage our congregation to adopt a Compassion International child and support them in pretty simple yet very personal ways. And we'd kind of set up the building. There were pictures. There's a table out front with pictures of a number of children from all around the world on display, and then people could come in and kind of look at their picture and read their profile and all of those things, see when their birthday is, and all of this, and choose a child to sponsor. Mike always was here early. He was here about as early as the staff, sometimes earlier. He was ready for church and had his coffee and he was ready to rock. So he came in, he was early, and I remember seeing him just kind of looking and perusing the table. A little bit later on, he came to me, and he had chosen a child to adopt, and was pretty excited about that. A little later on, Mike returned to the table to see how many kids had been adopted, and Mike then selected another child to sponsor. He couldn't resist, he said. And after the service, Mike went back out to the table and looked at the pictures, and there were a few left, and he grabbed another one. He said, I've been all morning long. I just can't get this picture out of my mind. And so Mike adopted a third that day. And I remember asking Mike, who he had sponsored, and laughing. He said he couldn't make up his mind, so he just got all three. And then he said, and it doesn't matter. He said these words to me, "It's probably why I make more money than I really need." That is the expression of a generous heart, and Mike had a generous heart. Mike overheard me one morning talking to one of our elders about our plans to develop and improve our live stream by adding some tools, and we were talking about the timeline of all that, and the timeline was pretty much dictated by the cost of the tools that we needed to buy, and it was going to take a certain number of months to save up for the purchase. And literally a few days later, all the materials that we had discussed arrived at the church via the UPS. And the fact was, when Mike saw the need that was in his power to meet, he acted out of his generosity and care for people. He just decided to get it done. He had a generous heart. Mike also had a servant's heart. And from the very beginning, Mike was always asking how he could help, what he could do. And as Eric pointed out, even from week one, I wasn't there in week one, but from my week one, I certainly witnessed that. He would often come to the church and run the floor cleaning machine. Couldn't wait to mow the lawn with the big mower. I remember him talking about how excited he was, and he finally did it. After he did it, he said, "It was really fun, but next time I'm going to slow it down because going fast really beat me up." and he said it was like driving a race car. But he loved to serve, and he enjoyed blessing people that way. He preferred to have a role serving rather than a role being served. And he even expressed that at one of our events. Just, I just want to do something, then I know why I'm here. And I think that gave him a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. And the truth is, he always did it well. He really did. Mike was serious about living out his faith in Jesus. That was one of the things that really impressed me very much. Often he would call or just walk into the office with a question, either from the previous Sunday's message or from something he had read in the Bible or whatever, and we would discuss it. And I could tell he had always thought deeply about things, and once he felt that he understood something, he would always take immediate action, whether it was to call someone to offer forgiveness or to be more aware of what God was doing around him in order to help others to find God. I'm coming to the conclusion that Mike may have invited up to half of Delta County, actually, to come to Delta Christian Church. I'm meeting people, I meet people all the time who say, "Oh, that's Mike's church." And it's super fun, and I just love that. He was always striving to be mindful of the possibility that God was bringing people into his life for encouragement. And he He talked to me about how he enjoyed even that thought, just the thought that God would do that. And so he was always on the lookout. Mike was a true friend. I was thoroughly enjoying all the time that I was spending with Mike, thinking that this was quickly becoming a very cool friendship, and a rare friendship, I would say, in my life. When I talked to Mike, I felt like he got me. I don't know, I think you understand what I mean when I say that. He laughed at my jokes. Not everybody does. He did. We could talk nerd, and it was amazing talking nerd with Mike. It was really great. And here's the thing. I could say something, kind of techie, and he would act impressed. He might say he was be impressed, but I think he would act impressed. Because I know Mike knew so much. He probably forgot more than I'll ever know when it comes to that stuff. But he was never in any way condescending about it, and just really encouraging about all that stuff. He was always ready and willing to help, and wasn't afraid to ask when he needed it as well. A couple of times when he did, and it was such a privilege and pleasure to respond to that. And here's what I've come to realize is that the more I talk to people is that Mike made everyone feel this way, and I think that's super special. I only knew Mike for a very far too short few months. But here's what I know for sure that gives me great hope today, which is why I can come to this day with gladness in my heart, because I know that Mike knew Jesus and placed his faith in him for his salvation. Mike was admittedly an imperfect man who had experienced way more than his fair share of pain and discouragement and disappointment in life. Mike didn't blame God for all of the problems of his life, but rather he chose to look to God for redemption of all of it, including his own life. Mike made a choice to accept Jesus' gift of peace and wanted to experience it fully for himself. Mike wanted to learn all that he could about Jesus. Mike read and asked questions and listened. One day he brought this book, the biggest book I've ever seen. It was this huge book. Was it the Jesus Project, or was that what it was called? Do you remember, Eric? The Bible Project, thank you. He brought this giant Bible Project book in, and he was like, well, I read this, and I don't need it anymore, so I wanted to donate it to the church because maybe somebody else would like to read this. And we were like, really? You read this? He's like, yeah, and have you seen their videos? They're really cool. I'm like, have I seen their videos? He would read something in Scripture and call and say, what about this? And he was so hungry. Mike was hungry for the Lord. And he wrestled with all the ideas that he was learning and until he understood what to do, and then he did it. This is what I know. I know Mike is with Jesus. I know it. I know it as much as I know anyone is with Jesus. Because I got to witness something in Mike's life. And it wasn't until later on that it was actually after he passed that I even began to realize or have any sense of the change or what I was seeing was maybe a part of a radical transformation that Jesus was doing in Mike's life. which is so exciting, so amazing. Mike is with Jesus. Mike understood that belonging to Jesus didn't mean that everything would always be perfect. He got it. But it did mean that Jesus would eventually take him home and welcome him to a perfect eternity. We talked about that. I did not think it would be so soon. But we talked about it. We had that conversation. It was kind of an amazing conversation, and how ready he was for it. And by faith, Mike accepted that promise. And by faith, I know that my friendship with Mike will continue on forever in heaven, when one day I will catch up with him. I am so blessed to have known Mike. And it was just, it's a little crazy how short it was. Makes me a little jealous. I've been through a lot, a little frustrating, a little like, what was that all about? It felt like a brief visit, to tell you the truth. But in that brief amount of time, I saw so much grace and so much love and so much character. Mike's time here at Delta Christian and Mike's time with me in a friendship really did demonstrate to me, again, anew, if you will, the amazing grace of the God that we serve. And I am grateful to have known Mike. I am so grateful. Thank you for letting me share that.
I'll have to get my old man glasses out to read this. So thanks, first of all, for everybody for coming. I'm Mike's brother, Greg. I know that there's people that have traveled here from all the way across the country, both coasts, and I really appreciate everybody coming out here to participate in this for Mike. He was a great guy. So there's people in the room that have known Mike his whole entire life. There's people that have just met him, and then there's people that are in between. So, everybody's kind of got a different flavor of Mike, of what he was like. But to me, it's like the journey of knowing the guy that started and then where he ended. It was a good thing to see. So anybody that knew Mike would talk about his childhood to anybody. Like if he knew you for 15 minutes, he would tell you the most terrible stories things that we did. So I'm sure that everybody's heard that stuff, but at the same time, it wasn't all terrible. It was fun. So there were 3 boys. We had an older brother who's passed, and then myself, and then Mike. And any mom in here who's had a son, she knows 1's bad enough, 3 is terrible. So we get into all kinds of trouble. We break everything, and I could imagine poor Mike being the youngest guy in the house. It must have been pretty rough. He's trying to keep up with guys that are years older than him. So we did everything in our power to help him, in his his journey of manhood. And what I'm going to do in this is I'll tell a bunch of little Mike stories to get you guys kind of the flavor of it. So if you would like to come up and tell a Mike story, please do. But one time we were we used to build forts on the roof of the garage, and it's a garage, so it's about that tall. And so we're up there, and this is the 70s, so this is pre-parkour. So my older brother and I, we start jumping off the roof and rolling on the ground. And so we're telling Mike, you should do this. And Mike is a big man, not a very agile man. So we, as good brothers did, we convinced him to stand on the edge and you can see. And then when he stood there, we shoved him off. And we could have killed him, but we didn't. And I think he grew stronger because of that. And so we loved to ride our bikes all over and play baseball. We were always playing catch and all the things we did. It was a good time. And growing up, Mike and I were best friends. And that best friend's status probably lasted until, I would say, like junior high. Then I was just so cool. I couldn't be best friends with my big little brother. So we started to kind of go our own way, make our own friends and stuff. But at the same time, we were still close because we just did tons of stuff together. So one of the things I'm sure Mike has told you guys about is we didn't have there wasn't a lot of supervision. So we could get ourselves into some pretty good trouble. So one time we're up in the Sierras camping, Dad's fishing, and we're out walking around by frozen lakes, which is totally safe. And my brother decides he's going to walk out on this frozen lake, and I'm like, I think that's a terrible idea. But as everybody knows, you can't tell Mike anything. So Mike walks out on the frozen lake and falls in. So now he's in the lake, and it's not like a gradual thing, it's like a cliff. So now he's in this frozen water, scrabbling and going, and trying to get out, but he can't get out. He's not a very strong guy, and I can't physically pull him out. So I end up jumping in so he can climb on top of me to climb out, and then I climb out. And so we were freezing, but we made it, and I remember just being so nervous that I almost lost him. So that was tough. But couldn't ask for a better brother. This is tough. So in the late 70s, you guys, some of you will know that the Atari thing came out with computers, and my brother was in heaven. He loved that thing. So he would just sit there playing that video games, and my little brother and I were like, nah, that's okay, but that's really not our thing. But it was totally his thing. And that progressed into Commodore 64. That was his first computer. And to me, that looked like a typewriter, which meant school. And I was like, not interested at all, but not Mike. That was magical. He played on that thing and fooled around with it constantly. It had captured his imagination. So he ultimately ends up as an older college student. Some of his college roommates are here, and they're younger than him. But he had a little bit of a rocky start, and then he got into college, and he ends up down at San Luis Obispo, and he's, taking classes, whatever, but he ends up getting his first computer job, and it's at the Grid, actually with Dave right here in the front. And he was ecstatic. He was calling, telling us how cool his job was, and everything was just great. And Beth and I, we were married at the time, and we would go down and visit him, and we would stay in his apartment, and he loves video games. So this was back in the day with the dial-up modems and all the cables running to all the computers, and we're playing video games, and Beth is bored to tears because she hated video games, and so she'd read a book or just lay on the couch as we played for hours. But it was good times, and it was fun. But here, 25 years later, he's still a computer guy. That was his thing. He loved computers, and he loved fooling with them, fixing with them, talking about it, everything. And I would ask him, hey, what are you doing about, your retirement? Are you saving money and stuff? And he goes, well, I'm not going to retire because I love what I do. I'll do it till the day I die. And that's a pretty smart guy. I mean, he teaches everybody around him to, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And he truly lived that. So about that time, he was out of, I think he was out of San Luis about the time we had Jared. And Jared comes along, and then he became an uncle. And Big Mike, he's holding this tiny little baby, and it's really cute. And he loved it. He loved his nephew, and he was there all the time. And he ended up living in an apartment that was 5 minutes away. And so he was always at our house and coming by and stuff like that. And it was good for Beth because I was super busy with work, and if she needed anything, Mike would come by and help, or even watch some of those hit Sleepless in Seattle movies. Mike could watch those with her, and they had a good time. So anyway, this is a great story. One time, we had a dog, a golden retriever, and she'd picked up a tick on our walks, and this big bloated tick stuck to the dog. And of course, I'm at work, so she calls my brother and says, "Hey, you got to come in and get this tick off this dog, because otherwise she's going to put it down. She's done with the dog." So my brother, I don't know if you guys knew, if the people that really knew Mike, now you're gonna be surprised. So he races over, he comes over, grabs that tick, pulls it off, throws it away, gets in his car to go back home to do whatever he's doing. He calls me on the phone. He says, "Hey, I just came to your house and I got this tick off your dog." And I'm like, "You did?" Because Mike doesn't do creepy crawlies. He doesn't do that. And he goes, "Man, I wanted to scream the entire time." He's all, "But I did it." And I'm like, "Hey, that's awesome." But that's totally Mike, willing to do whatever he had to do, even if he didn't want to. So just like John said, my brother was the most generous person I've ever met. There are Blackstone griddles, there are Traeger pellet stoves up and down the country that he has gone to someone's house, given them one, and just left it. And there was no, nothing attached. It was just, would you like this? Done. And you guys know those things are expensive. But he's bought dozens of those things and just given them out. I've never seen anybody like that. And it was kind of defined of who he was. And if he heard you needed money, if you were starting a business or whatever, and you were a friend, he would give that money. Money didn't mean anything to him. There was a time in his life where he was always chasing a paycheck, like the highest paycheck. And he would always tell me, like, I'm making this much now. What are you making? And he would do this thing. And I'm always like, man, I don't really care. Just, as long as I have enough. That was always my thing. But then all of a sudden, over the last, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, all of a sudden he just was like, I don't care about the paycheck. I want the happiness. And that was what I thought was so cool, is he had finally gotten to the point in his life where he was happy with who he was and everything. And now money didn't mean everything to him. It was more of something that he could use to help others. So like John said about the kids with Compassion International, he actually picked up 2 more. So he would text me their pictures. So every month he was paying $40 a month for 5 kids. I mean, that's Mike. So then he finds out that there's this guy in Afghanistan named Nur Ahmad who needed $1,200, and I think it was on the Compassion International website, and they were trying to raise $1,200 to buy him a cab, a little taxi cab. It's like the front end of a motorcycle and the back end of a box. And he's a Christian in Afghanistan, which I can imagine was probably hard. And he wanted to be able to provide for his family, and he couldn't get a job because obviously there's religious tensions and stuff. And so Mike just goes, $1,200. And he sends me a picture of this guy who I still have on my phone, of this guy smiling, holding onto his cab. And he goes, check this guy out. He's going to be able to provide for his family. He was so excited. It was like he got the $1,200. And that's like the example for all of us, So one thing about Mike is he moved around a lot. His friend Brian here, actually, Mike and Brian, one time, they made like a list of all the jobs they've ever had, all the places they've ever lived, and all the vehicles they've ever owned. So I think the places they lived was like 32 places, right? It's something crazy. Like, yeah. So it's like an insane amount of, he would just move constantly. So, I think it was 2019 was when he moved to Colorado, right? Yeah. So in the beginning of 2019, or maybe towards the end of 2018, he wasn't very happy living out in California, and he lived at maybe 10 minutes from my house, which I liked because we could see him all the time. You see the kids, and it was a good time. But he was struggling and trying to find his way, and he was not finding it there. So he decides, I think I'm going to move. I think I'm going to move to Colorado, and in typical Mike fashion, all of a sudden it's like, yep, I'm moving. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he gives me a call, and he says, yeah, I left. Okay. I mean, that's how Mike was. So what was going on in his life at this time was he was becoming more friends with Greg, this guy right here, and who has an awesome name, by the way. And and he was, Greg's a very religious man, very, part of his church and stuff, and he was becoming like kind of a mentor to Mike, and Mike was starting to see that and starting to really, I guess, want to take it into his life. And what's funny is for years, my wife and I go to church, raise the kids in the church, and we would drag Mike kicking and screaming to church every time, and he would be pissed. There would be fights and like bad pictures where he didn't want to take the picture for Christmas that year, all that stuff. And all of a sudden you got a guy who's more talking about it, and he's starting to think about it, but he's still not committed. Well, the crazy thing is at our church that we go to, the pastors, we have a really good pastor like here, and he does these sermons that are really like, I always take something away. I always walk away going, oh yeah, I felt like he was talking to me about that. That's great. This is how I can apply this. Well, he was talking about like being a steward of the church and how is it's you can be a believer in Jesus and a follower, but that's half of it. It's actually spreading the word is half of it too. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that because I'm just not that kind of guy. I'm like, if you want to talk to me about it, no problem talking to you, but I'm not going to go around, like my brother inviting everybody to church. That's kind of not my thing. So then the next Sunday, he does a sermon on forgiveness. And my brother was a great man who felt he was undeserving of forgiveness. And when the pastor's telling me this, it's like he's talking to my brother. And all of a sudden I went, I got to tell Mike about it. Oh, that's what he was talking about last weekend. Oh, got it. So it's like everything clicked that I needed to spread that word to my brother. So he called me and told me he's left. And he was driving to Colorado. And I'm like, okay, good luck. I guess, tell me when you get there, that type of thing. And I hung up the phone after talking to him. And then I thought about what we just gone to church and talked about. And I called him back. And I said, hey, what are you doing during your drive? And he said, I'm just listening to books on tape. I said, would you do me a favor and would you listen to this sermon? It's 20 minutes long. It's not long. So I texted him the link. And he goes, yeah, I'll listen to it. He called me back about 25 minutes later, bawling. And he was like, that's me. I said, that is you, dude. This is like you're on the path. Like keep going, keep doing your thing. You can find forgiveness here. You can find happiness. And it was awesome because when he moved to Colorado, the only good thing that I think that he talked about was going to church with Greg and becoming more involved. And he would read every Tim Keller book out there, and he would want to talk about it all the time, which was great. It was really cool to see him doing that. But then, in typical Mike, he decides he doesn't like living there anymore. And he'd been there a long time, and it had been at least 8 months. So then he decides, in Mike fashion, he's going to sell his house, and typical Mike, he actually makes money. You're like, if it was me, I would have lost money there, but he makes money on it. But he doesn't know where he wants to move now. So I said, well, what about, maybe like buying a trailer? The whole COVID thing was starting, and I'm like, you could live in your trailer, you could do your job anywhere. And that's, he always said that he could. So I just think about it. And he's like, oh, I don't know about that. What about power? And I'm like, oh, you're going to go to a campground and plug the thing in. It's like a house on wheels, dude. I mean, it's not that hard. And so he's like, I don't know. Next week, I've bought a trailer. And I'm like, okay. And, like no history of ever doing any of that. No idea how to do any of it. I've got some great black tank stories that are just tears would be pouring down your face. They're so funny. But he took off and he started touring around the U.S. I mean, kind of had a weird start, going up into, because I think it was October when he sold the house. So, that's the time that you want to go to Wyoming because it's really nice up there. So when all the plumbing froze in the trailer, he came back south and then he went south and ended up, a big giant route, ended up actually down in Fort Lauderdale to visit his friends down there. But it was funny is everywhere he'd go, I go, like, where are you? He'd say, I'm in, East Texas. And I'm like, where are you going? I'm going to head this way. And so I'd look things up. I said, oh, you're going through Louisiana. You've got to go through, Monroe, where Duck Dynasty is. So he went to the Duck Dynasty place and took pictures of a bunch of the stuff. And, and I would always try to, like, catch him. And he's like, I'm going to be here for a week, which meant, like, maybe 2 or 3 hours. So you talk to him the next day. You can hear the car drive in. And I'm like, where are you? And he goes, I've taken off. I'm going. I'm like, well, before you get too far, on the Mississippi River, like take one of those riverboat trips, like Mark Twain style, try it. And he's like, oh man, I'm in Alabama. I'm like, dude, okay. So he happens to end up here in October of last year, and he's up in Grand Junction. And I don't remember exactly where he was going on that, but he was going west. He might have been coming back out to see us. He just seen us in, I don't know. Can't remember, maybe August. He'd been out to see us. So yeah, he was coming back. Maybe, I don't know which way he was going. But so I'm talking to him on the phone, and he's going to be there for a week, which meant a day. And so I'm looking on the phone, and I go, Black Canyon of the Gunnisons. I'm like, hey, I've never been there. It looks beautiful. You should check it out. So he drove south and came through this area, and he loved it. And of course, Like his friends can tell you, he said, I found the place I'm going to move. And he would tell us that everywhere. He told us that like in Cleveland, and you're like, no one moves to Cleveland on purpose. So, but that was, so we're like, yeah, Mike, whatever. And so he says, well, I'm going to move my trailer to this place called Cedar Edge. I'm like, well, that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what you should do. And then he says, oh, and Greg found me a church in Delta he thinks would be a good fit for me. So then next you know, Mike's coming by the church, and next you know, he's calling us, and he says, I'm volunteering at the church. And we're like, that's awesome. And it's just amazing. And you could just see it. It was like he'd found that fertile soil that he needed to grow roots and just to blossom. Like he'd not found that in 50 years. And here he found it. And it was great. It was awesome to see. I wish he could have done it a little longer. All right, so I've got a really good Mike story to finish this one up, and it was really hard to pick it. So there's the hemorrhoid story, which I could tell you probably one-on-one outside of church, but it's hilarious. There's almost sitting on a rattlesnake, the Silt Souk in Thailand, Mike's BMW M6 sliding down an icy hill. There's all kinds of great ones, but this is the one I picked because it was funny. It was typical Mike. So I was a police officer, and when Jared was born, my wife she's a teacher, and she was still working as a teacher full time. So during the week, I worked nights. But during the week I had Jared, and then I would go to work at night, and it was great. It was a lot of good sleep in that time. But I wanted to get LASIK done because my night vision wasn't as good, and I didn't want to have to wear glasses. As a police officer, you can get hit in the face, and that wouldn't be any fun. So I was going to go to a place to get LASIK, and it was like the next county over, but I had Jared, and so I asked my brother, like, hey, can you go with me? Because when we drive home, I can't see, and then also I need you to hold on to Jared for me. It takes about an hour. He's like, oh yeah, no problem. So he's got little Jared. Jared's probably like, I don't know, 6 months old or something like that. He's a little guy, and they're outside playing or whatever, and I'm getting my eyes lasered on. And then I get done, I come outside, and Mike's like, well, we got a problem, dude. And I'm like, what's up? And he goes, well, Jared would love to just drink like water, juice, or whatever, just constantly, and just pee through diapers like crazy. So my brother had been changing diapers like all day. And so he'd used almost all the wipes. He had 2 wipes left. And now my son also, sorry, Jared, was known to drop some pretty major bombs, like clothes devastating things. And so my brother's like holding him like, and he's like, I can't do this. So I'm like, I can't see. So anyway, we put him on the tailgate of the truck, and I'm like trying to do dang man, like you're looking through water, and I have 2 wipes, and I get it all cleaned up, and it was no trouble, no mess on anybody else. Clothes changed, and Mike was so impressed. He's like, you are amazing. And I felt good. I was like, I was super dad there, So it was pretty funny that, poor Mike in the dirty diapers. But if you, if everybody knows Mike, or everybody knew Mike, like I said, and everybody has a different view of Mike, wonderful guy. Couldn't ask for a better brother, and gonna miss him dearly. But, Brian? Brian is Mike's best friend, and he wanted to say some words as well.
I also have a Mike Traeger smoker, by the way. And an ice machine. Yeah. So, since it's Mike, I figured I'd start off with a rap lyric from Tupac. It's pretty mild, Padre. We're good. Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies inside while still alive. So, my name is Brian. Mike was my best friend, whether you called him Mike, Michael, Big Mike, Crazy Cracker. I mean, we all knew Mike in different capacities. And Mike always would tell me, he prided himself that he treated everyone the same, and he was, everyone fairly, everyone exactly the same. But what he didn't realize is that he meant different things to different people. And I think a lot of people are kind of seeing that and saying that. And we've seen a lot of different sides of Mike, especially since coming here. So I just want to talk a little bit. I don't really have a lot of Mike stories for up here because it's hard to kind of hold it together. I've known him so long. He's been so important in my life. But to me, Mike was generous. He was transparent. Mike was caring, honorable. He was brotherly, trustworthy, dependable, and funny. Like Greg said, Mike was a wanderer. I think I tried to build the pattern as he kind of, same thing. Greg said he called me, and I'm like, dude, where are you? He's like, I had to leave. Someone was smoking, so I had to leave. And I'm like, it's Tuesday at 10. Like I'm at my desk working. I'm like, I don't know, whatever. Mike had a great life, but he was a wanderer, and he spent the last 20 plus years. And I think when I pieced together his route that he'd send me all the time, I think part of it was just going around the blue states. That was the only pattern I could figure out. But he was a wanderer, so I talked to him almost every single day, and he was in search of his place and his people. I think it was almost exactly a year ago that he found that here in Cedar Edge. I can't tell you, we were at the Pondy last night, and this is literally, like, I've been all over the country, all over the world. This is literally the friendliest place I've ever been. Like, you guys are all absolutely amazing. Like, it's crazy how welcoming this place is. I've never been anywhere else, so that's my experience. But I've got countless stories, and I'm sure you guys do as well, that I'd like to share over the course of the weekend. Like yours, most of my stories end with Mike dipping out the back. Maybe you guys haven't experienced that one yet. Or maybe some of you guys will have some stories, but if Mike were here, we'd probably be looking like, where'd he go? And I hope to hear yours and meet the rest of you that made an impact on Mike's life, that just made him who he was and the great person that he was. I think it's exciting to be here in his favorite place with his favorite people, celebrating a person that won't go a single day unremembered, unthought of, and unmissed. Thank you.
Please, if anybody has a Mike story they want to share, more than welcome to come on up.
And he would say that too. My name's Janet, and I met Mike at the coffee shop up in Cedar Edge, and he blew in like a tornado with his little white dog. Big man, small white dog. And two of the things that come to mind about him, other than the fact that he was a friend to everybody that he met and so kind, at the coffee shop we went through a period of time where we were doing events on Sundays. And one of those was a sound bath experience. Anybody know what that means? Well, it's a bunch of people laying on the floor, including Mike, and people making sounds with bowls and walking around. So my son and Mike and I were laying on the floor next to each other, all looking at each other thinking, how are we going to get up from this? And we did. And then one other thing that happened, the coffee shop was really crowded one morning, and Mike came in with Peanut, and Peanut wasn't on her leash. And she ran around that coffee shop to every table, to every person, barking her head off, and the whole place was laughing. And I've never seen it or heard it laugh like that before. So he was a great man. I got to know him pretty well. I spent time talking with him there, and was glad that he attended the church that I go to, was here for his baptism, and I feel very fortunate to have known him. So.
My name is Dan, a friend of Brian's. We worked together for years, and he introduced me to Mike, like maybe 2013. And basically, I started gaming late in life. I used to not, my kids gamed, and I never gamed with him, but I started gaming as I got older, and then I retired in 2014. So I started right before that, and then I really got into it. So Brian used to game. Now he works too hard, which is unfortunate. But Mike became a gaming partner. So I was looking back, and I realized that we played. I calculated we played about 1,500 hours together. And when I throw that number out to my other gaming people, they're going, I think it was probably more than that, right? So, an extraordinary amount of time, playing games. So that's how I knew him. But I have just two quick Mike stories, and one, actually an explanation, John and Eric, I don't know if you knew one of Mike's philosophies in life were anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And he used to say that all the time. When I heard it, I go, it's kind of the way, I'm going to adopt that and use that because that's kind of the way I do things. And just, all the stories that you've heard, like, that kind of wraps it up. I think that really was, that was one of his philosophies. So the two quick stories are just both Mike generosity stories. So we spent a lot of time online talking. Met him a couple times. He lived in California. Michael's here. He's one of my sons, my second son. It's hard for me too. My other son lives in California. When I would go out to visit him, I'd visit Mike. And the first time that I met him in person, Michael was there too, and we went on a wine tour. Mike's, I hadn't met him before, right? That was probably a year into knowing him, and he said, "I'll drive you around all day. I'm not going to drink wine." So he just, spent all day driving us around. I'm not sure I can finish the second story, but whatever. Just all kinds of generosity. Mike would just buy us games. A gift would show up, and whatever. That was a theme in our relationship, and whatever. Everybody who knew him, could appreciate that. So.
Oh, not going to do that. So Mike and I, we met in San Luis Obispo in '98, so 20-something years ago. And it's a long time. He had this great sense of humor. When we first met, I could tell right away, just dry sense of humor, wisecracking, all kinds of stuff. And it was like, that's my guy right there. We became really close friends. And that was a great time in San Luis. San Luis, Mike, as Greg was saying, Mike went through highs and lows, and San Luis was a huge high. Because David Kraut and all these friends, Mike just kind of was the center of all of that. And he pulled in people, and everybody enjoyed hanging out with him, and so we ended up all enjoying hanging out with each other. So that was a great time. We did wholesome things, we're in church. We played board games and cards and stuff like that. But no, we also went to the McClintock's bar, and, Mike must have went way more often than I did, I don't know, but we would walk in, and 2 Mason-sized jar lemon drops were waiting for us on the bar top. So that was pretty amazing. Mike was the storyteller, and I think that's how he really kept in touch with a lot of his friends from back in the day. He would call and just share a tale, and you're always cracking up by the end of the tale. So I'm going to do my best to tell a longer tale, because a few years after San Luis, Mike and I were actually roommates, which was a challenge at times. At one point, there's a little bottle cap waiting for me on the floor outside of my door because I'd left it on the counter or something like that. So, but my wife now, my girlfriend then, she had gone to Thailand to study abroad. So this is the Thailand trip that Mike was alluding to, or Greg was alluding to. And he was brave enough to come with me for 2 weeks. So it's a 2-week Mike adventure, and that's a long adventure with Mike. So it's one of those adventures, though, that if you could do it with a close friend, it's memories for life, right? So you guys already know how cramped airlines can be, right? I mean, the average height in the U.S. is 5'9". Mike's 6'6". And so he knew he had to go, if we're going to Asia and we're flying Japan Air, I think we need an exit row, right? So we're gonna show up at the counter as early as possible. And so he walks up to the Japan Air counter, and there's this little agent there, and she just looks up at him, and he's like, I'm really hoping we can get exit row. And she's like, how about business class? And so we ended up having business class to our first leg in Japan, and so he and I sit next to each other in these really comfy chairs, drinking screwdrivers. And there's like, this is back in 2001, and they had in-flight entertainment. They had little screens on the headrests, and we were living it up. Now, the second leg of the trip was from Japan to Thailand, and the average height in Thailand is even shorter than Japan. So we weren't that lucky to get business class, unfortunately, and there's this wall with the screen, and Mike's knees are like, I mean, he's pushing the wall probably with his knees for 6 hours. Okay, it's pretty brutal, and he knew he'd barely fit in the seat. He knew he was in trouble, but he powered through it. So that trip was filled with highs and lows, and you're just palling around. Me, Jackie, and Mike are palling around Thailand, seeing ruins and walking through Bangkok and everything. But one vivid memory is just walking through one of those outdoor markets in Thailand, in Bangkok. And, you know, he's towering over everybody. A crowd of people, and here's Mike's body above it. But as he's walking by, everybody's just looking up at him and smiling. You know, it was such a cool memory to see. So we would also do these tuk-tuks. They're like little taxis with one wheel in the front, two in the back, little bed. And Mike, as we're going around, we get into this tuk-tuk, and all of a sudden the driver's looking at the sky, you know. And all the other tuk-tuk drivers are just cracking up at this guy that has to drive us around. That was pretty good. So one of the lows, though, on the trip, this is the second week, and we're in Phuket now. It's southern part of Thailand. And I don't know what Mike ate, but something did not agree with him. Something was very angry. And so the first 36 hours in Phuket, Mike is just stuck in his hotel room. And, we're good friends. We're knocking on the door and checking on him. He's insisting he doesn't need anything, okay? So now picture this. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning, and he finally wakes up and is well enough to go outside. And the hotel we were staying at, they didn't have water for a period of time. So I think he woke up with the most unbelievable thirst you can imagine. And so he's walking down to the first floor of the hotel, and his hair is matted against his face. He hasn't shaved in a little while. And nothing's open. So he's got to go outside in the streets of Phuket, just looking like he's been sick for two days. And he's trying to find something open, and he sees this restaurant with glass doors. And he just goes, bang, bang, bang. He's just water. And they must have been, freaked out, but, some things are universal, and they got him hydrated. So he tells it so much better, but that was one of those classic Mike stories. So yeah, that trip's going to be one that I'm going to cherish for years to come, my wife and I. So as Greg said, Mike was a little unsettled. He was a wanderer, as Brian said. So yeah, and Greg did touch on this, but 23 cars that he owned over the time that I knew him. He had moved 26 times, and he had 32 different jobs. We'd fill out a spreadsheet one day, and we were just, how long is your row going to be? Jesus Christ. Sorry. So, but the last 10 of those jobs were great jobs. I mean, he was a self-taught network engineer. I think he didn't learn the network engineering part in college. It was just he was an avid reader, and he wanted to know, and he wanted to be the best that he could be. And so he's great. It's great that he was able to find that and really make it his own. So we didn't talk as much the last few years because of the Mike Across America campaign that he did. But I think here in Cedar Edge, he was no longer unsettled. He took steps to work on himself during that time. His physical health, his mental health, I think he just really came to find his happy place. And when Greg sent me this, the competition you guys have for Friendliest Guy, I was like, what? He's on the Friendliest Guy list, and then he won the competition. That's amazing. So it means the world to me, as one of my closest friends, that he found his happy place here among you guys. I think it means the world to my wife as well, and to all of his friends in San Luis that really wished the best for him, and we're so glad that he found it towards the end of his life. Thanks.
I'm not going to go up the stairs because that would be a whole different show. My name is Brenda, and I have the pleasure of being Mike's stepmother. His dad and I got married when he was 13 years old, and if you wanted an adventure in life, have two sons, marry a man with two sons, and on the day you get married, there's two 15-year-olds, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. There's a woman. It was a challenge, but it was an interesting adventure as well. So the boys had mentioned about, sorry guys, you're still boys to me. The boys had mentioned about being in San Luis Obispo. Very near San Luis Obispo, where they were in school and work, there's a community called Pismo Beach. And the second Sunday in June, I think it usually is, or on Father's Day, they have a car show. We had very dear friends who traveled from Kansas to be with us today, the LaFons, who always had a car in that car show. Mike would often come to join us. We would go to camp. He would stay in his apartment in San Luis Obispo or in the area, and then he would come join us for the weekend to go to the car show and just visit. Well, the group grew. We would camp, but then friends would invite friends, and so our camping group grew. And most of us did not know everybody. There were a couple that knew everybody, most of us did not. So one of the ladies that was there, and please forgive me, but she was rather a naive woman, to put it mildly, decided that we needed to have an icebreaker. So as an icebreaker, she decided we should play a game called Two Truths and a Lie. And it was so, okay, we're going to play Two Truths and a Lie. So a few people go, and then everybody's kind of, and then we're kind of over this. And then Mike says, I'll go. Okay, Mike, your turn. Two truths and a lie. And he stands up and he says, I shot my mother, I shot my father, and I shot my brother. And this poor little naive woman looks at him and says, no, Mike, you don't understand. You're supposed to tell us two things that are true and one that is a lie so we can figure out the lies. He looked at her and he said, I did. And this woman, and Chris and Robert can attest to the fact, this woman's mouth dropped. She did not know what to make of it. And gave me but just to clarify it all, that boys being boys, like I said, 4 of them, BB guns come into the picture. So he shot his brother with a BB gun. Actually, my son shot his brother with a BB gun too. At which point Greg was chasing James with a BB gun, so that's the whole thing. An unfortunate accident, but it ended up not being too severe. He shot his father when he was trying to put a gun down and the safety was not on. But he did not shoot his mother. But yes, the game ended. No one wanted to try to tie it. So that's my experience as a stepmother.
I'm getting out my old lady glasses. We'll see if I can do this. I don't know. I tried to read this to Greg at home, and I was bawling the whole time, so we'll see. When I met Greg, it was like Mike came with him. It was like I couldn't have one and not the other. They were both of them. It was either Greg and Mike and me, or Greg and Mike and me and the kids. It was the three of us or the five of us. The kids had a nickname for him. They called him Uncle Milk, because when Jared was little, he couldn't say Mike, so he would call him Uncle Milk. But he was always part of the family, and you've heard the ups and lows and the good things and the bad things. And one of the things that was probably my favorite thing is that whenever Greg was gone, he would always come over. He'd be like, what do you want to do tonight? When the kids go to bed, what are we going to do? What are we going to watch? And he would watch all those chick flicks with me. And Greg would never watch those. He's like, I'm not watching that. I'm going in the other room. So I would call Mike up and I'd be like, hey, Greg's going to work or whatever. Come over and we'll watch Hitch or whatever. And he's like, okay, should I bring ice cream? Yeah, bring that too. Because Greg wouldn't do that either. He wouldn't eat dessert with us. We'd go to a restaurant and be like, what are we going to have for cocktails tonight? Greg didn't drink, so Mike and I drank, and Greg drove us. And what are we going to have for dessert tonight? Because we'll share dessert. And Greg's looking at the menu, like what he's going to get for his main dish. And we're like, well, we're not there yet. So one of my favorite stories, though, is in recent years, Greg had retired, and Mike was moving around when we were in Vernal, Utah. And I called Mike, or we were talking to Mike, because he would call all the time when we were driving. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Mike, last night we went to this restaurant, this Mexican place, because we love Mexican food. And I had this amazing margarita. You should have been there. It was so good. I was drinking it. Your brother was there. It was just me and your brother. But, I had a really good margarita. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And they gave me this shot that, came with the margarita. It was so weird. And I didn't know what to do with it, so I just put it all in because I figured they didn't have any alcohol in there. But no, there was already alcohol in there. It was super strong. He's like, I'm coming out. I go, what do you mean you're coming out? He goes, I'll be there tomorrow. I'm coming. I'm like, it's like 5 hours away. Got in his car, booked a hotel room, came. The next night, we were at that Mexican place again having a margarita. And that's just something we did. And then we would go, when he came in the springtime for his 50th birthday, we said, we got to take you to this place. I think it's called Carmel Ranch. Is that where we went? Is it Clint Eastwood? It's his restaurant in Carmel. So we said, we're going to take you there for your birthday. It'll be great. And whenever we went, Mike always had the fanciest, nicest cars. And he and Greg were so opposite that way. Greg would have the car that looked nice, but it didn't have the fancy seats. It didn't have the butt warmers. It didn't have the steering wheel thing. Didn't have the sunroof. But Mike's always had all that. So Mike always wanted him to drive. You got to drive. He'd sit in the back, and Greg and I'd sit in the front. We'd even go on dates. He'd watch the kids, and he'd be like, take my car. Here you go. So anyway, he had this new truck, and it had this moonroof that opened up over the whole thing. It was huge. So we go, and we have our drinks, and Mike and I are having a good time. We decide we're going to open the moonroof, and Greg's driving, and we decide we're going to have karaoke. Well, none of us sing well. So we just turn it up as loud as we can. We're like, okay, you pick a song, and then we would all sing it with the sunroof open, and we're screaming and singing, and Greg's probably thinking, oh, God, I got to take these two drunk people home, and we just would have the best of times. And I have two other brothers, and Mike and I were closer than me and my other two brothers, and it's going to be really hard not to have him there all the time. And sorry. So anyway, when we came here in June, like Greg said, he had said, I found this place. And we're like, yeah, okay, again. You found it again, okay, where is it, whatever. So we're like, well, let's go see this place. Okay, fine. So we came here, and it was like we were at the movie star. It was the weirdest thing. Greg and I just kept looking at each other. Hey, Mike, everywhere we went. People knew him. We were like, what? How do they all know him? This is so weird. We came to church with him, which was weird because, like I said, we used to drag him to church, kicking and screaming, or sometimes he'd tell us he was sick so he didn't have to go. And he's like, you got to meet all these people. And we met so many people, I didn't even know all their names. And it was just so inspiring, and we had conversations about God, and that before he would never want to talk about. And it was just, Greg and I looked at each other, we're like, he did find his place. It was here. And it was so neat. And it was so fitting that on the day that he crashed, I guess you could call it, collapsed, he was here in this church. And we were so thankful that he was here, because otherwise he would have been home by himself. For how long? We don't even know. But we're like, oh my God, God put him right there around all these amazing people that he knew. And we are just so thankful that he found this place and this church. And And you guys could never know how much that means to all of us that knew him for such a long time, that he was searching for all those things. And he found it here, and you could really feel it. It's just such a special place. And I really just appreciate all of you, and thank you all for everything you did for him, because it meant the world to him and it meant the world to us. So thank you.
Hey everyone, my name's Steve. I've worked with Greg for, got our whole lives pretty much, and like his wife was saying, Mike came along with the package, so you know, we worked together, we worked a bunch of assignments together and hung out all the time. We would go to this one restaurant that was Greg's favorite place, probably because it was half price. It was a hamburger place in town. And if you think of those two and you listen to all the stories, they couldn't be more polar opposites. I mean, they were both in all the stories, but they were night and day. I mean, here you have Mike just living like a shooting star. All his stories, everything he did was big and fast and the best it could be. And it's almost like he lived he passed too soon, but he lived like a full life in such a short period of time. And he impacted everyone like in the same way. There's a common theme that you think about, like his generosity, who he was. He would walk into a room and just brighten it up, you know, with that smile and the laugh. You could hear it right now. And some of the best stories we had were just, he would come meet us for lunch all the time, and we were working undercover narcotics for a while, and so we were sitting in Greg's favorite restaurant, and his brother comes in, and he was just full of stories. He's like the person you'd always want to show up to a party, because he always had a new story. No matter how long you knew him, he had a new story where, you know, we've all got that friend that you're like, go get kidnapped or something. You're like, so we've heard all your stories, you know, we need something new. So he would come in and he would tell a story that you felt like you were living it with them. And we just heard endless stories about their childhood, all the stupid stuff they did. The fact that they were still alive is a miracle. And so he came in one day and we were pretty bummed out. So he's looking at us, he's like, what's wrong with you idiots? And so he clearly was always the smartest guy at the table. And so we're telling him how we had gotten this, what was it, Call of Duty, I think, was like this new game that came out. And so we were in our narcotics office, and they had put computers in. This is early 2000. So we tried to load this thing onto the city computers, and the city had been recently hacked. And so we've been playing it for a while, and then they, you know, set off like the internal flags. And so IT came in and they shut us down, and that was like our whole world. Like, it's like, so we were devastated. And so he comes in and he's looking at us, and he's like, I can fix this. So we let everybody wait till all the bosses go home. We get him up in our office, and he's in there, and you know, he hacks into the system. This is like a city, a police department, you know, all these requirements. He gets in there, he loads our software. We're now playing it great, and then he tells us at the end, he's like, yeah, actually, your IT is all screwed up. I fixed some other stuff for him. So he actually he hacked in and made the system better. I don't think they ever really knew. You could probably go there today and still play it. They probably never even saw it. So it's just like that was just him. He would find out what you needed, and he got joy out of just helping others out. And I think one other story that stuck with me all the time is he shows up, and this was during like when, you know, Mike had the biggest, best everything. So he shows up, I think it was a Mustang. He had bought the fastest production Mustang out there. I don't even know why you could have it on the street. The thing, he barely started. It was like a dragster. And so we're back in uniform at that time. So we're eating it at the Hound again with Greg. And so we're all talking. We have a great lunch, and we go out in the parking lot, and Mike happened to be parked next to my marked patrol car. So I'm talking to him. He's showing me the car. It's like the coolest car you've ever sat in. And so I couldn't drive it right then because we were in uniform. So he takes off, and we go out to a main road out in El Camino and Lincoln, like with there's university, there's cars, there's people everywhere. It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he lights up the tires, and I'm in a marked unit behind him, and he takes off. And so everybody's looking at me like, hey, jackass, are you going to do anything about this? So I'm like, great. So I got to turn on my lights and act like I'm chasing Mike now at this point. And we're going through the streets of Santa Clara. It's funny, we were both rolling, laughing so hard. And then I can't wait to find like the right turn off so I can get out of there without people seeing me like just not do anything about it. And you could just see his laugh from the rearview mirror, and I'll never forget like that. He would do his best to make, just to make the best of every day and every encounter. So, just gonna miss him. Thank you.
So, I'm Megan. Mike was my uncle. Unlike my parents, I don't have a pretty, well-prepared speech. Probably should have done that, but I didn't. So I'm just going to kind of wing it. So, I remember my uncle being over all the time when I was a little girl, and it was like having another best friend, because I had my older brother, who was my very best friend, and then I had my uncle. And he was so fun, and just the tallest guy I've ever seen. And like, even now, even in college, as I am, he's still the tallest guy I've ever known. So imagine me, about yay big, being like, whoa, that's the tallest guy ever. My uncle's so cool. And so he was always there, and he always just was down to have so much fun with me and my brother. But he was also good for like stuff that I wanted to do too, because usually most of the time I'm a pretty tomboy girl. I'm pretty happy running around playing tag and playing in the mud and eating dirt and stuff. But I don't remember how I got it, but it was this little makeup kit for kids. And so it's more, you know where I'm going with this. It's more grease paint than it is anything else. And Lord knows it's a nightmare to get off. And there's only so many times I can convince my older brother to let me paint his face hot pink. And so my uncle showed up, and I'm like, hey, Uncle Mike, would you maybe let your favorite niece paint your face? And to my eternal shock, he agreed and let me. And there is probably a picture of my uncle with just the most god-awful makeup you've ever seen. Hot pink eyeliner. It is amazing. And I've got a big smile on my face. He's got a big smile on my face. And he was just always just like another best friend for me. And it was so great that when we moved when I was about 10 to the beach, and I was pretty upset because it meant that we wouldn't be living near Uncle Mike anymore. And then to my surprise, he moved about 10 minutes away. And so that was awesome. I was like, yeah, Uncle Mike's here again. And so I was so excited. But I remember one day I was coming back from an all-day swim meet. I was with my dad. Jared and my mom had to stay behind because Jared was too good at swimming, and they had to stay for another couple hours, to Mom's delight, I'm sure. And so I'm driving back with Dad, who's pleased as punch to get out of there, but we get a call from Uncle Mike, and he's talking. He's like, I have a dog now. You have a what? And he's like, I have a dog. In these last couple years, it's probably become less apparent, but my uncle was a bit of a germaphobe and a bit of a neat freak. He put up with me and my brother as much as he was able, but at the end of the day, I'm sure he was delighted to go back to his nice, clean apartment where there were no muddy kids running around. And he was like, yeah, I've got a dog, I've got a puppy. And I'm like, you. And so we changed directions, we stopped going home, and we go over to my uncle's house, and he's got a teeny tiny white fluffy dog. And he's like, yeah, I need help coming up with a name. And so Peanut's name came from a mixture of places, and it came from the fact that when Peanut was a little puppy, she had little brown ears. She grew out of that, and she is fully white today, but she had little brown ears, and Uncle Mike had a cat that lived next door called Jelly. So I'm like, hey, what about Peanut Butter? And that is how Peanut got her name. But it was everyone's surprise when he got a dog, but she ended up being really good for him. And we all know that he liked to have the nicest things, and he liked to have the newest phones and such. And so every couple of months, I'd get a text from a random number. He'd be like, "Hey, this is Uncle Mike. I've got a new phone." And I'd be like, "Great, I have to go rewrite your contact again." And so I decided a while back, I don't remember how many years ago I decided this, I'm like, well, now you're just going to get an entirely new contact every time that you get a new number, because it's too much trouble to go in and change your contact every time. So instead of so I had my Uncle Mike contact, and then he'd get a new number. I was like, all right, well, you can be Uncle Mike 2.0, like a computer. And I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I'm like, ha, Uncle Mike 2.0. He does it again. So I've got Uncle Mike, Uncle Mike 2.0, Uncle Mike 3.0. I think I've got Uncle Mike 8.0 in my phone at this point. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back through. So I've got 8 different contacts for him, all in ascending numbers. But I thought that was funny. And so, yeah, I just, every so often, I'd be like, all right, what number am I on? 8? Okay, here we go. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone here, because this place really brought out the best in my uncle. We said that my uncle was really caring and really generous to everyone he knew, but there was a bit of a thing where you had to get to know my uncle first, and sometimes that could be a bit of a challenge in the way that he presented himself. And it's good to know that he lived in a place that really brought those walls down so everyone could see what a great man he was.
I am also Greg. I haven't known Michael as long, but he's been a wonderful friend to me. But it's funny, some of the things people have been saying, him ducking out. Every holiday he would come over, as soon as the kids got excited, he was out the door. It's, you just talked bad to your mother like that? You're going to allow them to do that? I got to leave. I can't be here anymore. I can't believe you let your kids act that way. I'm out. What are you thinking? It was the funniest thing. He would just run right out. And it was funny, the first time we met him for work, actually, he said, hey, don't worry if I leave during the middle of dinner. And we were at the Rosewood, actually, which is a pretty nice restaurant in Palo Alto. And we're ordering this nice meal, and his steak comes. It's sitting right there. Where's Mike? Where's Mike? We call him about an hour later. Where are you at? He's like, I told you I was going to leave when I got uncomfortable. We go, you actually left? He's like, no, I'm seriously leaving. I'm at home right now. He's like, just leave me alone. I'm done. It was one of the funniest things. But one of the things for me that Mike has really taught me, it's been said a little. One of the things about Mike you need to know is that there's a lot of good and fun things with Mike, and there's also a hard side that he struggled through. He had a lot of anger. He had a lot of forgiveness problems with himself. He had a very harsh side. But I think all of that, especially once he come here, is what really made him and drove him to the Lord. It's something that without that, he wouldn't have been the Mike you knew when he was here. He had to go through these hard years of just questioning himself, questioning why he was here, why was he even around? I mean, everything from not believing he should live to others. He really struggled. But it's amazing that the Lord found him and saved him at the right time. And he got to be here with all of you. So thank you very much.
This is bad. Mike and I have something really in common. This. My name is Tony. I knew Mike from here. Thank you for telling us all those stories about the other Mike. I'm not going to lie to you, I feel pretty jealous at the moment. I had 6 or 7, 8, 9, whatever it was, how many months. I've never grown so close to somebody so fast as that man. I have kind of a Mike story. It's kind of a science story too. But when Mike got baptized, it was right over here, in that area over there. if you know anything about the laws of displacement, the tank may have been a little bit full going into that morning. I play bass on a band, and I'm over here. I think the first 3 rows felt a little bit like a Gallagher concert. John said, I baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and down he went. I think I got wet over here too. It was the best day ever. The crowd clapped, and it was exciting, and we knew what it meant to Mike, and you could see it on his face what it meant to him. And another day here that was a good day ultimately for Mike was the day that he fell ill. And like you said, and I didn't have a chance to meet you yet. Your name?
Beth.
Beth, thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. No, you probably did. I'm old. As Beth said, so Mike had been ill for a couple days. I had texted him a few days before we got together on Saturdays to do some Bible study stuff, and he didn't feel well, so we didn't get to meet that day. And when we got here that morning to practice worship, he ran the live stream. We couldn't get the camera to work. And so I sent my number back to the guy at the booth, and he called Mike, and Mike said, well, it's a really easy fix, but I'll just go ahead and come down. And it was just like always. Mike comes in the door. It's just, hi, Mike. It was great. And a little bit later, Mike collapsed. And so what I want you to know is for 50 years, for 50 years, I heard some amazing stories of the people that loved him. And I just want you to know that on that day, he was surrounded by a different group of people that loved him just as much. It was hard to watch that big man lay on the floor, but we were surrounded by people that he loved, that loved him, that were praying for him. He couldn't talk to us, obviously, but he was awake. But I want you to know that what I've come to find out is after those number of months that we hung out together and I felt I was pretty cool, it wasn't me, it was Mike. Mike was the cool one. Mike was the one that loved everybody. And I want to just thank you all for sharing that and know that he was surrounded by people that loved him as much as you guys loved him too.
All right. Should have, like my sister, should have prepared a speech. Definitely didn't. But here we go. I got 2 quick Mike stories. When I was a little kid, I think it was like 5 or 6, my uncle was building my dad a computer. It was this big silver case, and he's working on it, and he's always been super into computers, and he's like working on it, and I'm sitting there, and I'm bored because he's not paying attention to me. My dad's not paying attention to me, and I got all these Hot Wheels everywhere, and I'm slowly putting one Hot Wheels and then another Hot Wheels up on the top of the computer, and my uncle, like, at first he'd take the Hot Wheels, put it down, and I put it back, and he'd put it down, but then it slowly became like he gave up, and like the entire computer was covered in these Hot Wheels, like probably like 20 or 30, and he just thought it was super funny. And there's a picture floating around somewhere of this computer with a bunch of Hot Wheels on it, and me and him sitting there and hanging out. My second Uncle Mike story is he actually came out to visit me before he moved here. I think it was 2021. I'm stationed in Fort Bliss, El Paso, and I'm in the military. So showing him around the base, having a good time, and my uncle's always like, "Okay, what's next? Like, what are we doing? Where are we going?" And I'm like, "Okay." Like, we went to my favorite restaurant, we went to this, we went to that, and I'm starting to run out of things to do. And there's certain things I could do with my uncle, and then there's certain things where I'm like, oh, let's not do that, and let's do something else. And I'd completely run out of stuff to do. And I was like, oh no, he's gonna stay here for another 6 hours. So we were in my truck, and I just started driving in a direction. I'm like, oh, look, it's beautiful. And we just started talking for hours on end. So I think I ended up driving just straight in a line for 2 hours. And we pulled off in a parking lot, and he had Peanut with him. And she went out to go pee, and then we just turned around and started driving back. And it was really cool. And he really found his people here, and it was a really good place, and it was really good for him. Thank you.
This is LJ.
I'm LJ.
And I'm Larissa.
Yeah.
We are the ones that have Peanut now, so I have a everyday reminder of Mike. Funny story about Mike. You know, not only was I an Amazon junkie, but so was Mike. I mean, he'd come to the house, we'd have dinner. I got tired of seeing him at Las Mesa every day, so we convinced him he needed to eat dinner at our house a couple days a week, and I have Westies at home, so apparently I like these little white dogs too. But one of my Westies decided to sit in her water dish. It was hot. It was a hot summer. And he's like, why is she in her dish? Well, she needed to cool off. Does she drink that water? Well, yeah, it's her water dish. 2 days later, we have a swimming pool for dogs.
I love it.
Just out of the blue, I'm like, where'd this come from? I can't accuse my husband of shopping on Amazon. He thought I ordered it, but no, Mike sent us a swimming pool. So.
Oh, my friend Larissa and Steve. Well, I am an extrovert, and I don't give any of you any choice when I come to hug you. You better just be ready. And I hugged Mike many, many, many times. Like every time, Thursday morning coffee for the last 7 years, y'all. Thursday morning, 8 to 9. We just changed to Friday. It's been in the news. So Mike would come into coffee. I never knew that man was an introvert. He let me hug him every single week.
That's big. Mike did that, likes for sure.
And I'm like, he sees me coming, and I never knew. He just let me hug him. He loved on me, and I just always thought he was that way. So I guess that people adapt and they change and they find their place, and I'm so glad to have everyone. You all are so special to have this here. It means a lot to us as his friends, and our love goes out to you, and we miss him, and we know that we only got him for a little while, and y'all have had him for a very long time, and I'm sure that you miss him more than we do. But we thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for coming. And when you all come to town, all you have to do is call Larissa. She let you know, and I'll give you a hug. Love you all. Thank you.
So one of the things about Mike, I have to say, is, he made a huge impact on everybody, but he made us want to be better for ourselves. Right. He always, I'm bad about interrupting people, bad. And he would get on my case. And so anytime you were around him, you were like on your best behavior.
That's hard for her.
So hard. He did. He brought out, he helped people be better. Just, yep. That was Mike. Yeah.
My name's Rick. I just came to the conclusion that Mike died of the opposite of a broken heart. He opened up his heart, he let Jesus in, he let everybody in. What a way to go. I want to go that way.
Thank you, everyone, for all the great words and stuff. And we have a slideshow that we like to show, and it's got a ton of pictures, and maybe even a picture that my daughter was talking about, some makeup on Mike. So hopefully you guys will like it. It won't take too long to show it. And then we have some cookies and some drinks, water and stuff like that over here. There's Mike's favorite cookies and some candy in your bag, so please help yourselves.
And his favorite drink.
some of his favorite cookies are from both of his favorite bakeries in Cedar Edge, and enjoy some drinks